Okay, so now that my program can discover XSS vulnerabilities in forms, I want to implement a method to discover the same vulnerabilities in links. So, in our example, in this particular example in here, this XSS vulnerability can be exploited through the text box, and it can also be exploited through the link, because you can see in here we have the name parameter followed by an equal sign, which means that this parameter will actually pass the value that we give after the equal to the web application. So if I just paste my script in here and hit enter, as you can see, the XSS vulnerability is going to work. So what I want to do right now is basically write a method in which if I pass it a normal link, so if just a normal link that says name is equal to test, it would be able to replace the test with the test script and then check if this link is vulnerable to an XSS vulnerability. So doing this is actually going to be very simple. I'm going to implement this method here, and let's just call it test XSS in link, and this will take a URL as an input. And then again, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to set our XSS test script. So I'm going to copy this and paste it here. The next thing that we'll do is we're going to say my response is equal to self.session.get, because as you know, this is a URL, so we can use a simple GET request to read the response. So we're doing self.session.get to send the request as part of our session, and the request URL is going to be the URL that we get as the input to this method. And then what we want to do is we want to replace the equal sign in the URL. So we're getting a URL similar to this one in here. And what we want to do is we want to replace the equal with another equal followed by my test script. So I'm going to say my URL is equal to URL.replace, and I want to replace the equal with another equal so that the equal is not removed, but this time I'm going to append my XSS test script to the equal. So now my URL is ready, and it's going to look something similar to the URL that I'm exploiting when I paste my test script in here. So all I have to do now is to actually submit this request and analyze the response. So we're going to say the response is equal to self.session.get, because this is a normal URL, so we're going to submit it using a normal GET request. And the input to this GET request is going to be my URL. And then again, all we have to do now is to check if my XSS test script is in the response.content. If it is, then we're going to return true. And that's it, we're done. So as you can see, a very simple method similar to the one in here. The only difference is we had to replace the equal with equal plus my test script instead of submitting the test script as an argument in the submit. Then we're sending a normal GET request, we're storing the result in the response, and then we're checking if the HTML code contains the XSS script. If it does, we're going to return true. Otherwise, the method is going to return none. So let's test this. So in here, we're going to call my test XSS in link. This will not take a form as an input. And I'm just going to get the link in here. And I'm actually just going to put a normal text in here. So we're just going to say test. And I'm going to copy all of this, paste it here. And I don't want to print the form, so I'm going to remove this. And let's go ahead, test the code, And perfect, as you can see, it's telling us that this is vulnerable to XSS. Now you can go ahead actually and test it with a link that is not vulnerable. For example, this link right here, just to see if we're going to get a false, because we should. And run it again. And perfect, we got none, which means that it is not vulnerable. So right now, in our program, we have two methods. One of them can be used to discover XSS in links, and the other one can be used to discover XSS in forms. Now, in the next lecture, I'll show you how to put both of these methods in my run scanner method and be able to discover all XSS vulnerabilities in all pages in my target website. Now, I also would like to show you something that you could use when programming. So, when we say if this is in this, basically this expression right here, Python is going to evaluate this to true or false. So it's going to check if XSS is in the response, this is true, then it's going to return true. So instead of using an if statement and then returning true, I can actually remove this. And I can just say return the evaluation of whether XSS test script is in my response.content. So it'll check if this is in this, then it'll return true. Otherwise, it'll automatically return false. So I can do the same with this statement in here. I can just say return this, and then I can remove the true and remove the colon here. And basically Python will evaluate if XSS test is in this variable, it'll return the evaluation of this automatically. So if this is true, it'll return true. If it's false, it'll return false. So let me show you real quick. Right now we have a false URL that is not vulnerable. So if I run this, I'm getting false. And then if I go back here and set this to a vulnerable URL, and let's go down and run it again, and as you can see, it's returning true. So it's just a nicer way of returning a value. Instead of saying if this is in this, return true, and then otherwise it'll return none, we can just write it this way and it'll work just as good as the previous method.